Talks, a podcast designed to support people going through a relationship breakdown and all of the challenges this brings. I'm Matthew Taylor.
And I'm Liza Gatchell, family lawyers at Stowe Family Law. And today we're joined by Liz Harrington of Family Flow, the Divorce Collective, an organisation supporting women and mothers through the transition of separation, divorce and post-divorce. So welcome to the podcast, Liz. It's really lovely to have you here today. Do you want to start just by introducing yourself to our listeners?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me. So I am Liz Harrington. I am co-founder of a gorgeous company called Family Flow, the Divorce Collective, with my gorgeous, lovely business partner who sadly can't be with us today because she's literally in a van moving up north. So I hope I'm enough entertainment without her. So Family Flow has been going only really since September 24. And it was brought together by me and Susie meeting in a Facebook group for mothers, and her approaching me and saying, look, I've got this. She already had the company. It was a parenting app, but because of her relationship breakdown and divorce, she wanted to do something different. I retrained after my second child, and I've worked in helping people with trauma for over 12 years now. And I had a real interest in the financial side of things. I used to work with a lot of entrepreneurs, looking at what was holding them back in business, why we self-sabotage and so on. But then I had a lot of women coming to me with financial trauma caused by their divorce or relationship breakdown in their relationships and afterwards. And then I got divorced. And that was very interesting and a very long process. So I retrained again, and we've kind of like brought everything together to try and give everyone a one-stop shop. We're not lawyers, we're not financial advisors. We're very good at that, but we also know our limits 100%. But we've got the coaching, we're both trauma-informed coaches, and obviously I've got the therapeutic background as well in the trauma aspect. So we think it's an amazing offering, especially when we get to work with amazing people like you guys.
The flattery will get you everywhere. It's really interesting. Great to have you here. Shame that Susie can't be, but I'm all in favour of anyone moving up north because it's better up here. So, that is a valid excuse. So today we're talking about Walkaway wife, which is a great little phrase. Let's start with unpacking that a little bit. What does it mean? What is a walkaway wife? What are the signs? How does someone become one? There's probably quite a lot to unpack there. But yeah, what does that mean to you?
Okay, so I looked this up and I thought I'd read out what ChatGPT said. A term used to describe a situation where a wife, after feeling emotionally neglected and unappreciated, gradually distances herself from her marriage, which I also call quiet quitting, and eventually leaves. It's often characterised by a sudden and shocking divorce decision after years of unresolved issues and emotional disconnect, often leaving the husband feeling blindsided. Now, we looked it up on Google beforehand, and I have to say, when you gave me this title, my eyes rolled and I thought, oh, here we go again. Women are getting the blame. I'm a bit of a feminist, but I do love men as well. And it's so, like, the name itself, there is a thing called walkaway husband syndrome, but I don't think it's as catchy. So it probably isn't known much more.
There's no alliteration. So
Exactly. So I think it sounds like we just decide one day, right, I'm packing my bags and leaving, that's it. And it's so much more than that. I think it's years of not being listened to, years of lack of communication. And I'm not saying it's all the husband's fault at all. It works both ways. But I think women generally, everything I say, I caveat with, this is a gross generalization, a lot of what I'm saying, but it's what we see and it's what we've experienced, me and Susie, in our own lives and in business. And it's years and years of that lack of communication, that lack of connection. People change in marriage, especially when kids come along. And I think for a lot of people, there isn't that like extra work put in when the change happens, and you just drift apart. And then, the toxicity cuts in. And if things aren't addressed, if you don't do stuff to build your marriage and to recreate what you once had, you're going to kind of drift apart. And that's okay for some people, but for some people it's not. And then obviously as well, we've got the neglect aspect that's a bit more than just the usual sort of drifting apart. And then abuse as well. And I think it all combines to just be like, I can't do this anymore. And I do think, I'm sure men would tell me differently, but I know that I did everything I possibly could to make my marriage work. It took me years. And I had to throw in the towel. That's what we hear so often. I tried everything. I tried my best. And then people start saying, did I try my best? Did I walk away too early? And we think, no, you didn't. You put up with way too much. So it's a lot more than the title suggests, I think.
Do you think, not to give any sort of excuses, but do you think some of this comes from differences in generations? And so if we go back to sort of our parents' generation or our grandparents' generations, there were very traditional gender roles within a relationship, and one party was very much the worker, went out, brought in the money, and the other party very much the homemaker. And then we moved to, perhaps, I couldn't say which generation, it probably changed, but certainly as a millennial growing up and a woman, very much told that, you can have everything. You can have your family, you can have the career, you can do all of this, but perhaps the building blocks weren't there. We hadn't moved away from those traditional gender roles enough for the support to be there, to be allow some of that to happen.
Yeah, I think absolutely everything you're saying, Lisa, 100%. I know my dad said, when my relationship failed after my marriage, he was like really disappointed. Oh, again, you just walked away again. It's like, oh my God, really? And I think we do, there is that attitude that you should stick at things and you should just put up and shut up a lot of the time. And I think when we look back in generations, we look at, well, women stuck it out then, but actually, did they have any other choice? Women weren't allowed their own bank accounts until 1975. We used to not be able to get a mortgage without a man. So actually, where could we have gone? What could we have done apart from go back and move in with our parents? Which a lot of the time that wasn't an option. So I think there is more choice, there's more freedom, but actually it's really, really hard. And I think a lot of the time, like you say, we can have it all. That message, you think it's easy to walk away and start a new life. And then you find out when you do it, it's actually really hard. So it's kind of like all these mixed messages that we're getting, and we swing from one thing of not being able to do anything to thinking we can and then realizing we can't. And, it's just all a bit of a mess, isn't it, really? But I think the main reason we walk away now is because ultimately we can. And I think in the past we couldn't.
I'm interested in what you said about maybe it looks like it comes out of the blue, but actually it's been years and years and years of trying to have the communication, trying to do this. And this is this podcast is going to be full of sweeping generalizations, but let's just roll with it. And there are obviously differences in the way that men and women operate and tendencies and things. And, this is hashtag not all men, but in general, women tend to be more emotionally intelligent than men. In general, I think it's fair to say that. Maybe people disagree, but I think that's probably right. And I think, to what degree does that kind of slightly men are from Mars, women are from Venus, attitude towards open communication, attitude towards and ability to be emotional intelligent, what does that play into these kind of slow burn drifting apart that then suddenly there's this schism and there's the walk away effect?
Yeah, I think it massively plays into it. Hopefully both parties try, but it is often, in our experience, and again generalizing, but the women try, and the male in the relationship may, like, let's take marriage guidance counselling or couples counselling, whatever you want to call it. We do work with men as well, and as well as women. And they sometimes say, oh, well, she's just walked away or she's just left me and she won't go to couples counselling. And I do say, did she ever suggest that before she walked away? And reluctantly they say, oh, well, yeah, they did, but I didn't want to go then. They try and they warn and they do everything they possibly can to be taken seriously and say, we need help. We need something to make us better. Quite often they end up thinking it's them. It must be me. I'm going, well, especially women of my age. Oh, it must be the menopause. I'm losing my mind. Or, I've been under a lot of stress and anxiety recently. I'm trying to balance too much. I'm trying to hold too much. Elderly parents. Again, it's the women that are quite often the primary carers in the relationship for even in-laws, elderly in-laws, let alone their own parents. And so all this puts such a massive strain on them. I'm not saying men don't have strains or similar strains, but we have so many. We're juggling so many, where I think men have a bigger ball to juggle, but less of them. I think most women can genuinely say, I tried my hardest.
We know from the stats that most divorces are instigated by women. So it's about 70-30 split. It tends to be women who starts the divorce process. Now that doesn't necessarily who starts the divorce process in terms of the legal terms doesn't mean who's made the decision to leave. But there's probably some sort of indication and correlation there. I mean, Lisa, with your clients in your workload, do you recognise this dynamic that Liz is describing and the sort of a more common way round for it to happen in terms of the communication and then the woman feeling that they've done the work and maybe the husband hasn't engaged until it's too late?
Yeah, I think that's really common for women to come in and say, I've tried everything. We've been to marriage counselling, and often actually sometimes the men will go to marriage counselling, but there might be a comment that, you know, once we get to session 2 or 3 and they're having to do a bit of work, then they kind of pull out of it. So, you know, almost they go to marriage counselling to pacify their partner, thinking like, well, there's nothing that I need to do. You know, I'm fine. It's all them. This will help them. And then actually when they're asked to do a bit of work, they pull away from it. I think that's quite common. Yeah, I think it's really common. And it is absolutely common for women to be the instigators of the divorce, but not necessarily because they are the ones that chose to break down the relationship. I think sometimes it's that they are the ones that want to finalise it. So even if they aren't the ones that have made that decision that the marriage should be over, they want that it's really important for them in particular to have that fresh start. And the divorce feels like the first step in that. Whereas I don't necessarily hear that from my male clients as much. They will much more be like, I'm happy to do it. I'm also happy if she wants to do it. It's fine. They're a bit more laid back, if you like, as to who instigates the proceedings than I think women are.
That's really interesting, because what we're finding, we run a free WhatsApp group. It is just for women, but we find a lot of women are saying, I think I need to sort the finances out, because they've separated, nothing much has happened, and they're gradually getting more and more stuff taken away from them. You know, some of them still cohabiting. I don't know how, why every ounce of respect goes towards them. I really don't know how they do it, but they do. But even when a cohabiting situation, they're split up, the husband may have paid all the mortgage and suddenly he's only paying half. And so from, like, say, let's make it really simple, they're earning 50 grand and the wife is earning 25, maybe part-time, maybe not, and trying to manage everything. And suddenly they've got to pay 50% more than they were paying before. And then it suddenly starts to unravel and you get less and less support, especially when you do separate and the households become separate. Obviously, you're trying to get 2 households out of what was one. And it's really difficult. And I think sometimes it's necessity. They have to move things forward because they actually can't live on what they're being given. I still say that. I hit myself every time I say that, on what they're being given, like it's a gift. They're not getting what they're entitled to, and the support and the agreement hasn't been made. So it's all, well, I will pay this month and I won't pay next month. You've got to do, you know, it's all conditional. And then it starts edging towards a bit of financial abuse, or at least financial neglect / taking advantage of. I mean, you know, we can't sort of sugarcoat it. It does often move into financial abuse. That was definitely the case in my situation. And I know it is in Susie's as well.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly can do. That's something that we see, and sometimes that can be intentional. Sometimes it's competing financial priorities as well. You know, that's not abuse, but that is the reality of the difficult situation. And that's why in a lot of cases, it kind of, I mean, this sounds like divorce lawyers saying, everyone just crack on with it. But there is a degree of wanting to move in quickly. If you're emotionally ready to do so, can be helpful to avoid those issues arising, because the longer you are trying to stretch, you know, limited finances into 2 households, it becomes a harder and harder thing to do, I think. Let's look at it from the 2 perspectives. Let's look at it for a wife who's listening to this and maybe thinking, oh, I'm hearing some of this and this is ringing bells. Or let's look at it if it's a husband. Look at this. And obviously, you know, we have people listening to us with same-sex marriages and things as well, where that dynamic might apply, albeit not with the wife-husband traditional label. So maybe let's have a look at it from the wife's side first and then come to the husband. If you are in that position thinking, oh my God, this is exactly how I feel. I've been trying to have that conversation for years. I've been raising things, or maybe I've not been raising things, and maybe I've not felt able to communicate things to my spouse, but it's stuff that's been bugging me and we're drifting apart and, you know, we don't spend time together. So what are the sort of the flags? What are the sort of things that can be done at that stage? What's a sensible way to kind of explore how you feel, I guess?
I think if you're having doubts, and you're saying to your friends, I'm not happy in my marriage, or however you're saying it, there's a reason for that. Like, you have to take notice. And I know I had 2 friends call me out and they said, how many times are we going to hear this, Liz? And I still just think I'm so grateful that they said that, because I just thought, yeah, am I going to be saying this till the day I die? Am I going to be like my mum, who used to say to me, oh, I should have divorced him years ago? Thank God she didn't, because he ended up caring for her for 13 years after she had a massive stroke. And there was a lot of love in their relationship. But, you know, it's like, what are we experiencing ourselves? How do we value our own lives? What do we want to demonstrate for our children?
I think that's really interesting, hearing your friends kind of saying, like, we've heard this story a lot now, Liz, like, you need to get going. I mean, maybe you could expand on was that a sort of a revelatory moment for you? And like, your experience isn't obviously universal, but there might be other people who are saying, oh, do you know what? Every time I see the girls, I'm moaning about my spouse, and they are saying, come on now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they were very good, because they said, how many times are we going to hear this from you? And I do think part of them thought, just shut up about it and get on with it. I wasn't being encouraged to leave him at all. You know, I had friends say, be a bit graphic, I hope that's okay, but like, I don't want to have sex with my husband. I'd happily never have sex with him ever again. And I just thought, I don't want to live in a relationship like that. And that is an important part of marriage. Other people, and they still married people I know now, moaning about their husbands. I'm like, do something about it or get out. You know, you do have choices here. And I think you do need to think about the children, the impact of them on them. You do need to centre them, not put them in the middle. Lots of people say children will be okay, but actually I think they will only be okay if they're given some help, some guidance, and a lot of love around it. But that's not a reason not to leave. And I think a lot of the time when we almost get there and we almost make the decision, there's always a reason not to do it. And I think that it sounds really basic, but I think the best way of doing it is writing a list. And for God's sake, don't let your ex or soon to be ex partner, husband see it. That happened in one of my previous relationships and it didn't go too well. But a pros and cons list, a pros of staying and a cons of staying, but also a pros of leaving and a cons of leaving, which sound like the same thing. But actually, when you do 4 quadrants rather than just 2, you do get different things and you see themes. And I think you've got to go through that and go, okay, is this a deal breaker? Or that on its own might be, but with all of this other stuff, it's just too much. Is this mendable, or is it completely broken? Can we put it together? Can we put it in like Kitsingu with the gold, and they make things even more beautiful after they're broken? Or actually, is it just going to look like a stuck together mess that's actually never going to be beautiful again? Like, what is it I want out of life? We're only here once. We've got to live our lives. We deserve to be happy. We also have duty of care, but, you know, we can't sacrifice ourselves. And that goes for females as well as males, 100%.
Do you think, I'm just going to play devil's advocate here a little bit in a way that I probably can and Matt can't to this particular topic, do you think...
Thanks for taking that element, Lisa. I feel much more comfortable with this dynamic. Yeah, thanks.
Do you think sometimes as women, we don't help ourselves? And when I say that, I mean that, for example, we will complain to friends. And I have friends, you know, we go out having a glass of wine and there'll be lots of, I don't want to say husband bashing, but there will be some complaining that will come out from within the group. And it might be, he doesn't do any cleaning. He doesn't do his share of the household chores. He doesn't take the kids to school, or whatever it might be. Now, I have to manage all of the school admin. But do you think sometimes, and as I say, very much devil's advocate here, we don't help because we think we do it better?
Yes.
So, for example, like, he can clean the bathroom, but he doesn't do it the way I want it done. And therefore, I'm going to have to do it. And then I'm going to complain that he doesn't do it. And tell me how we can work that out if we're trying to make the relationship work, how we can sort of, that challenge.
That's such a good point. And I am not a relationship counsellor and I don't necessarily have the answer. However, I think we need to, like, we've got our own standards. And I have a theory about this. I think when women have children, I don't know how many of you have kids and don't, but everything in our life is out of our control. We have no control of these tiny little beings. We have no control about where our husband is or how much they can help or not help, to a point. We shouldn't have control of it, obviously. The only thing we can keep control of is keeping a clean and tidy house. And if we have a clean and tidy house, we think we're doing something right. We feel like, well, we must be an all right mum because it's not falling down and there's not stacks of washing in the sink and so on. And I know when I was really overwhelmed the other evening and I just cleaned my house and I felt so much better. I didn't clean my house, just cleaned my kitchen. Cleaned it, I say tidy it up, cleaned it. It wasn't dirty, it just needed a good tidy. But it just made me feel so much calmer. So I think that's one of the reasons why women become quite anal about cleaning, and we do, but we have to say, okay, what is good enough? And actually, what can I let go? And it's not like the way some women, again, generalizing, talk to their partners about how, like you say, oh, I may as well just do it myself. And I know I was guilty of that sometimes, completely hands up. I still do it with my kids sometimes. Like, I'm a single parent now, and I'm trying to really, my excuse is make them independent and good functioning people of society. Really, I just want to handle with the flipping housework because it's too much to do on my own. You know, and we've tried everything and they are great now. They're amazing. They do so much more than most kids I know. But I know it's really frustrating when they don't. But I have to, and it's actually being a single mum that I've gone, do you know what? Actually, it's all right. The kids have done it. It's not perfect. But if I start doing it again, A, I'm going to make them feel crap that they're not good enough. B, they're probably not going to help again. C, they're going to learn weaponized incompetence and they're not going to, or they're just going to do a bad job on purpose so that I don't ask them again. And I think that all comes into it. So I've learned so much from being a single mum and parenting in that respect, more than I did in the relationship. But so anyone listening, please think about that and think, actually, are you being fair to your partner? And also, I do think there is weaponized incompetence used a lot. I think, you know, I would say think back to when you first got together and you first started cohabiting and maybe you were both working full time. If it was more equal then, if maybe you had a cleaner to help out and now you don't, could you get a cleaner again? Could you get some help? But how things were split then, you know, he was probably capable of putting a wash on and sorting out darks from lights or whatever. If he's not doing that now, he needs to be picked up on that. But I think rather than accusation and, you know, conflict, you need to sit down and work out a plan. And a lot of men fall into, well, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. That's not okay. But if that's the only way that they can do stuff, because if they do anything, it's wrong, then again, you need to meet in the middle. So I think it's a really hard one and we are our own worst enemies sometimes, but there is a part of them not offering and us taking it all on, especially when maternity leave and stuff.
The key there, from my perspective, is what you say about working on it together. And that's the sign of a relationship that can function, because it can be let's decide together how we do this, what we do, how we do it, what's the standard, what needs to be done, you know, does it need to be done so it's, you know, sterile and you could have an operating theatre in there, or are we looking at just good enough because life's tough?
Yeah.
You know, wife saying to husband, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I've got 2 kids. I don't need the third one. I need you to work on doing that with me. And then the husband say, that's fine, but I need you to not be nagging me and I'll just get on with it and I'll have a go at me if it's not quite good enough.
Yeah.
You know, but having those open discussions is the way to go, because, you know, you can end up, you know, the flip side, the stereotypical flip side to the moaning about my husband doesn't do any work around the house is the blokes in the pub going, I'm getting nagged to death. And that's can be the dynamic. I think we're talking about probably quite traditional dynamics and maybe I'd like to think in younger generations it's less like this. I think there is partly a time and an age piece to this, but I think that can be the flip side. It's about making sure you don't fall into those, like you're having to parent your spouse. You work on things together.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, do you think that's fair? Do you think that's kind of helpful?
I love what you're saying, like the hope that the younger generation are getting it better. I don't think they are. We've got a few younger people in our group and it's almost going the other way, which I find terrifying. And I do think that is the influence of people like Andrew Tate, you know, the toxic masculinity that's happening. Why should I bother? I'm providing the money, you do everything else. And sad thing is, some of these men, they're not even providing much money at all, or they're taking it away from them. And it's really devastating. It's really scary and worrying. And I think it's going to be one of the biggest challenges for future couples is to get that balance right, because it's like, it's not women can have it all now. It's like women need to do it all. And actually so do men, because it's very rare that you can have a household on one income now. Well, not very rare, but rarer now, because the cost of living is so high.
Yeah, it's almost impossible. The economy requires dual incomes in most cases, and those are the problems that we see so commonly in divorces.
Exactly.
I've just literally come off a call with a new client this morning who earns really good money, really good money, and his wife has been off caring with the kids for years. And their future, if they divorce, they're in a big old house, it's expensive, but there's a big mortgage, and they can really struggle in divorce. And he's in an exploratory stage, and he's at the end of the call was, I was suggesting, look, just make sure that if the marriage needs to end, then it needs to end.
Yeah.
But, financially, if that's the lens through which you look at things, it's not going to be great for you.
Yeah.
And it's, that's just the situation. So you need to, it's very rare that you get people earning the exact same, that there's parity. There maybe does need to be some awareness of who's doing what, how many hours someone's working. But, it's also incredibly rare that someone is out working all the time and the other's got their feet up at home. That just doesn't happen, does it?
Yeah. And I think also we need to inject some realism. Like when you get divorced, your standard of living is going to decrease. You're going to probably very likely have to live in a smaller house. You might have to move into a not such a nice area. Your kids might not go to private school anymore. Obviously, everything I'm saying sounds very, very privileged. But, and it can be worse. You might have to live in a 1-bedroom flat. Hopefully, I know for some people that's their reality. But I think there is especially in the sort of walkaway wife sort of label, you've got this image of this woman walking away thinking she's going to live this amazing life. And that's just not the reality. Both sides are going to be impacted by this. But sadly, one side often gets impacted slightly more than the other, in my opinion.
So looking at things from the other side of things then, if you are a husband, or it could be, and I definitely do have clients where everything you said about a walkaway wife would apply to the husband more than the wife, is that they've tried to have the conversations and things, and it's just not engaging, and so on. So I definitely see it the other way. So if you are in the walkaway, that's a terrible phrase, I'm not going to say that again, but you're the person who's about to be walked away from, and you are listening to this and you're having a moment of clarity and realization, what should they be doing? What would you, if you could grab one of these people, rattle lapels and say, for heaven's sake, will you just ... What are the things that they should be thinking of doing to save the marriage before it gets to that point?
First of all, I would say, you are appreciated, even if you don't feel appreciated. I know my ex-husband worked really, really hard. He threw himself into his business. He threw himself into his career. And he earned a decent amount of money from it. And he did work really hard. And I really appreciated that. I still do. And I don't want to say but, and that it's not just about the money. Yes, you probably have provided. Yes, you've worked really, really hard. But if your wife went away for a week, which I did once, and my husband said, I could never do this again. Don't ever go away for a week and leave me on my own with the kids. Think about the other person and what they're going through if you possibly can. And I do think, again, women need to do this for men as well, like I have just done. Put yourselves in their shoes. You've got to talk about it. If you're worried that your wife is becoming more distant, then talk about it. And it's not just in the bedroom. That's not just the only sign that there's something wrong. It's going to be elsewhere. And if you're not noticing that, you need to open your eyes and just look at things and be willing to go there. Read some books, go on some courses, seek support. I think everyone having therapy or coaching or counselling, we go through a lot in life. There's going to be stuff that you go through that impacts your marriage and your relationship. And if you don't feel supported in your relationship when you're going through the other stuff, that's going to impact it even more. So I think honesty, but careful honesty. Think about how you're putting things, practice it, maybe write it down, read it back, check it with ChatGPT. ChatGPT is our best friend now. We check everything through there. And just to get a more balance, tweaking a few words can make a real difference. Yeah, again, I'm not the best relationship counsellor. I'm a single mum. So I wouldn't be where I am if I was. But an openness to work on it, I think, is really important. I don't know. What do you guys think?
It comes down to communication, and we bang on about communication almost every single episode that we record. But whether you're still in a relationship, or whether you're separating, I think that's the biggest issue, isn't it? Is your ability to communicate through all those life's up and downs and changes. We're not in a time now where people's life expectancy is 35. That's when till death do us part. That's kind of the amount of time we were talking about. We weren't talking about potentially being in relationships with people for sort of 50, 60 years. And I think we change so dramatically throughout our lives that sometimes it is just a case of we've reached different stages and have grown apart potentially through no fault of either party sometimes. And so, we just have to have that constant communication to get through those different stages, and so that we're not making assumptions, because I think that's where a lot of things can fall down, is just assuming that the other party's okay, assuming that they agree with what you think, assuming that they understand what you're thinking, which actually isn't always the case.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd add the capacity for self-awareness and self-reflection and self-analysis is really important. Very, very, very few divorces are 100% the fault of one party. And really, that's only in quite severe abuse cases.
Absolutely.
I won't categorise them in that way. So in most cases, and in most happy marriages, you're doing something that annoys your spouse. If you are being told constantly by your spouse, you're doing something that annoys me, if your response to that is, no, I'm not, that helps no one. It's just not true. It's not true, because whether you consider you're doing it on purpose, whether you think it should be irritating, whether you think it should be an issue, it's an issue. So you need to reflect on that. And rather than just deflecting and saying, well, that's a you problem, not a me problem, you have to analyse, okay, the thing that I'm doing is causing discomfort. Can I amend the thing that I am doing? Can I do the work on myself? Can I analyse? None of us are perfect. And it's fine to go, and it's a growth mindset thing to go, I should probably do this because it winds someone up, or I'm not pulling away, or whatever it is. I think if one person in a marriage can do that, then most of the time, and if the marriage is savable, if people should be together, then the other spouse will A, recognise it, and then B, take the lead and say, okay, well, then when I'm getting criticism for the way I do X, Y, or Z, maybe I should have a look at that. But that capacity for self-analysis, which not everyone has, and it is a tool and a skill that needs to be worked on, I think that's just as important, because the communication is great. But communication will, that can descend into, I'm communicating the fact, Lisa, you really annoy me when you do this. Thanks, Matt. I disagree. And I'm communicating the fact that you're a pain in the arse because X, Y, and Z. Well, I disagree with that. Thanks. So you need to be able to take that and analyse and do the working stuff. So that's what I'd kind of add to that. Absolutely.
And I love what you say, Matt. That's what it comes down to. And there's a lot, there's some talk of like, well, it's not what they said. Don't give them the power to impact you. Don't give their words the power to upset you. And you do have to take self-responsibility. I think you need to be really aware of your triggers, and almost write a list. Okay, what do they say that really makes me go, that's so annoying. Don't go there, and really gets me going and angry and ends up in a row. Be very, very aware of your triggers, but also have that ability, as you say, to self-reflect and talk about it and take some responsibility, not just for what you're saying, but for how it's landing. Because if it's not landing right, maybe they're being triggered, and it's not your job to necessarily sort that out and psychoanalyze it. Maybe they need some help, maybe you do. But actually, it is about how people take what you say. And if it's consistently being badly received, there needs to be some work. And that might involve the help of a therapist or a counsellor or a coach. A lot of the time when I'm working with clients, they come to me and they say, oh, he said this or she said that. And it's like, okay, what do you think they meant? And it's like, let's not ignore the words, but what were they actually meaning? And was it really about that, or was it about something else? And okay, how did that make you feel? What parts of you were triggered by them saying that? What parts of unresolved conflict in your past were triggered by that? What stuff from maybe from your childhood or past relationships that have come up that they might not know anything about, that are replaying in this scenario? What do we need to work on so that you're both empathetic, open, couples that are trying to aim for the same thing?
Absolutely, really important. I mean, I think before we wrap up, maybe we should and we try and keep this part to a minimum, but should we talk about the law?
Yeah.
Go on then. Lisa, any big issues that people should be aware of if you are a walkaway wife and you have gone, right, that's it, I'm out, I'm leaving the family home, I need to get out? Does that have any consequences, any issues, any problems?
Or what if they're physically leaving the property?
Yeah, literally walking away from the family home, moving out. I'm literally heading out.
I mean, legally speaking, it doesn't change your financial interest in the property. I think that's sometimes a concern, that if they've left the house, suddenly they're signing away their rights to the value or the equity in the property. And that isn't the case. It can have implications, though, because particularly if you would like to remain living in that property long term with the children, then ideally we would want to kind of keep you there for the interim period, because it kind of sets up that status quo. It's not the only way of getting to the end result that you want, but it's kind of the easiest one, if you like. If you're still in the house with the children, it opens up more avenues. However, if you are absolutely adamant that you don't want to be there, you're not comfortable, and you've got somewhere else to go, one of my pieces of advice would be take the children with you. Don't leave the children behind, because that can again set up a status quo then that they're living with dad. And if that's not what you want as an end result, you need to be mindful of that. Again, it's not that these things can't be changed, but it just makes it a little bit more difficult potentially further down the line. And the other thing then is just getting early advice, I think would be my main point. Like, speak to somebody, go through your specific circumstances, because it's okay for us to have a chat about this on here, but everybody's circumstances are slightly different. And particularly if you have been sole care of the children, stay at home mum, husband is the one that is a high earner, there will be concerns about how am I going to live, what money am I going to be able to get, and we can talk about things like interim maintenance payments. We can talk through maintenance payments for you, we can talk through maintenance payments for the children, we can talk through what will happen if you can't agree, because there are certain applications that can be made to court to put those in place. We can talk about how you can fund legal fees in those circumstances, whether we're looking at court orders or litigation loans or family and friends or access to joint money, if you like. So there is a lot of things to go through, and the advice will be quite individual to the individual client. So just hold your horses for 2 seconds and speak to somebody before you make any drastic decisions, so that you know the full impact of that. Is there anything you'd add to that, Matt?
No, not really. I think that's all helpful. Obviously, you've got all the interim finances points. Yeah, I mean, my advice tends that there is a fairly, I think it's probably quite an old school thought with family lawyers, which is, oh, don't move out the family home, because then either you can't retain it, or if you want to sell it and your spouse objects, then it becomes a nightmare. And yes, that's possible, but I kind of take a view that, well, look, if you are struggling living under the same roof, then, you know, that's a horrible situation. You've got to put on your own oxygen mask first, and you can make it work. It's not, you know, you've got to weigh it up. Taking the advice before you go is probably sensible, so you're appraised of the potential pitfalls, but it is certainly not fatal, and you've got to do the thing that makes you happiest and most able to cope with what is a difficult process. So yeah, I think that's all I'd add. Well, we'll go with our traditional end to these podcasts. Liz, what we like to do is finish with, what are your sort of top tips for anyone, whether wife or husband, feeling like they're in a marriage where this walkaway wife syndrome might be about to hit? What would you give people for your top tips to cope with that?
I think, as we've discussed, communication, honesty, authentic honesty, being very aware of your triggers and, you know, danger spots, I guess, getting help. Like, if you think you're going to walk away, like Lisa was just saying, get help as soon as you can, get the legal advice as soon as you can, but also get the emotional help. It's a really tough time. You need the emotional help. Even if you've been planning it for years or thinking about it for years, when you do it, you're still in shock. It's still a really traumatic experience. Or you might have an initial euphoria, but then you actually realise, oh my God, this is a reality. I won't be able to stay in the house, or I can't afford this or that or the other, or he's reacted really badly. So I think look at the long-term financials, but also look at the behaviour that's likely. Like, how are they going to react? What's going to be the impact of friends? You know, don't rely on mutual friends to support you, because they will find it really difficult, and find yourself some other people to really help you with. I'm not saying you won't get it from friends and family, but you might not do. It might not be what you expect. You really find out who your friends are when you go through divorce. So get the support, speak to someone like us. There's loads of divorce coaches, there's loads of stuff online, but ideally, if you're talking to someone and getting into a community where this is happening, you're going to feel supported. You're going to feel like you're not the only one going through it. And I think that's what most people feel. Like, it's just such a shock, and it's like I'm the only one that's experiencing it. And the reality is there's thousands of us, probably millions. We kind of are, it's a bit of a community, you know, it's a great one. There's loads of people that just really want to help other people in this world.
Brilliant. They were fab. Thanks so much, Liz. So that's it for this episode of Stow Talks. Thanks for listening. You can learn more about Liz's work at familyflow.co.uk and all the usual social channels. Liz and Susie have very kindly set up a unique code for listeners to give you 20% off any service you purchase through their website. The code STOW20 will give you the 20% off. Family Flow, the Divorce Collective, is also offering you a free gift called 10 Steps to Successful Negotiations. This is a really useful support tool to help with the practical and emotional aspects of divorce negotiation. If you would like more information on our podcasts, head over to stowtalks.co.uk and please rate, like, share and review this podcast where you can.